This has drawn my life. I've seen this loads before on YouTube and I really fancied doing it myself. So this is my mum and dad. They met while my dad was working at a garage, which was called Glasby's Garage, where my mum worked as well. That's where they met. They got married and had me. Now, toddler Georgina, she wasn't all that well. Turns out she had a problem with her heart. So at age 3, I ended up being taken into hospital. Turns out I had Fallot's tetralogy, which is a heart condition, meaning that there's a hole in the heart and also some of the tubes and things don't really work as they're supposed to. Jimmy Kimmel's child actually had what I have. I was in hospital for quite some time, had to have the whole chest breaking thing open. I've got quite a substantial scar from that. And my parents called it my zip and press studs, which was kind of cute for a child to wonder why they've got all these scars on the chest. So after that, when I was so pleased to recover from that, because it's quite a heavy thing to go through at only age 3, and in those days it was really serious and not everybody survived it, but I did all right. I'm still here. So when I came out of hospital, it was discovered that my little brother was on the way. And that made 4 of us. We then moved into their first house, their first paid house, which was so cheap in those days. And that was, the family home. From then, I went to Ferrybridge First School, the cutest little school, which unfortunately has been knocked down now. It's such a shame. And I've got so many fun memories from school. I know not everybody can remember that sort of long ago, but I definitely can. I remember being in a costume competition, dressing up as Pierrot, which is like almost like a clown with a teardrop. And I remember my mum spent so much time making that costume. Also, while I was at the school, there was an incident when I was about age 7. And yes, ambulance all over again. Back into hospital. This time I got my thumb trapped in a door. There was a girl there who decided that we weren't going to get into the class until the teacher was there. My thumb was in the door. She slammed it and it pretty much squashed the end of my thumb, which means that I've now got a wonky thumb on my right hand. Following that, I went up to middle school. Now, middle school, I kind of blended in really. I wouldn't say I was anything special, just, one of the kids there. But they used to have a sports day every single year, and I think that was, the first time I really took part in the sports days. And I was so excited because it was the sack race. It was a weird race. It was like egg and spoon in a sack. So you have to kind of jump your way down to the finish line holding this egg and spoon. My glasses dropped off. I passed them to somebody in the crowd and I still managed to win the race. That was like my first ever victory ever. From there, I went up to high school, and again, I kind of just blended in. There wasn't anything special about me. In high school, I never took drama, music, anything like that. I didn't really know what I wanted to do at that point. I did really enjoy listening to my mum and dad's records at home. I used to sing along to them. My dad was a big fan of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, so I used to sing along to those albums, especially the White Album and Abbey Road. And I also listened to musical theatre, which was my mum's kind of thing. There was Evita, The Sound of Music, Jesus Christ Superstar, and I used to listen to those in my room. But at that point, there was still no music really in my life other than listening to them at home and just kind of singing along. So while in school, I joined the library and became one of the librarians because I really enjoyed just looking after the books and storing the books. So every sort of lunchtime and after school, that's where you'd find me in the library, reading through the books and just generally hiding away, I suppose. Before the end of high school, there was this group of people that came into the high school to celebrate people that had become famous and left the school. So they were doing like a special show. And there was no one backstage to show these people that had come in, the lighting and sound guys, where everything was. And I got chosen. So that was my first sort of glimmer of being involved in a show. And I was backstage. I became the sort of stage manager, if you like, wearing a headset, and I was obsessed. I thought, this is a great job. I really like this, being backstage in the theatre space. So I then joined the drama department and started to join in little plays and stuff like that. And my drama teacher noticed that I had a bit of singing ability. He said that I sounded like Carole King. I didn't even know who Carole King was at that point, and he used to get me to sing a few songs here and there. And I hadn't taken music or drama or anything like that as options in school. It was quite late on. I think I was only about 15 when this happened, and started to get involved in the school shows. From then, I decided to do more dancing. I joined dance school. I'd been dancing from being little, but this was more serious for me. I decided to join a dance school. I decided to join an amateur operatic society. I was involved in so many shows. I think my first ever show was I was a nun in The Sound of Music, because there were way too many Liesels. I ended up being a nun in the show. I think there was probably about 20 to 30 kids who all wanted to be Liesel, and I didn't get it. I ended up as a nun instead. But that's kind of how it developed from there. And I then went on to college to study performing arts. And while at college, I had to study singing, dancing, and acting, but a big part of the course was also the technical side, so lighting, sound, stuff like that, and I love to get involved in all of that side of things. Now, this is where I met my first boyfriend. Now, unfortunately, my first real boyfriend was, how can I put it, overprotective, jealous, possessive. I didn't really have a great relationship as my first one. Unfortunately, I had to go through a lot in that period of time, and it took me, I'd say, 2 years we were together, and it took me quite a while to get out of that relationship. But I got there in the end. And at that point, because it had been such a bad relationship, because I'd gone through so many just emotional and physical damage, I decided to continue my studies. But this time, instead of locally, I travelled to Manchester. I kind of ran away. Now, when I moved to Oldham, this was quite a step for me. It was the first time I moved away from home. I lived in like a lodging house. It was like a lady's house, and she divided it up so that students could stay there. So there was someone kind of watching over us, but it's the first time I had to, learn how to cook for myself and all that kind of thing. And it was awesome. I loved it. It was a great experience, but it was predominantly backstage at that point. I became an assistant stage manager, also did props, lighting, wardrobe, all that kind of thing. And the singing kind of went on the back burner. And because of that, being at Oldham College, which was part of Manchester College, or rather uni at the time, I was spotted through a friend to go and work at the Palace Theatre in Manchester. So in the day I was studying, but at the night time I was working in the theatre. And it was the same while I was Wakefield as well. When I was in Wakefield College, I studied in the day, but I worked at the theatre, the Opera House in Wakefield, in the evenings. So I wasn't one of those kids who would go out clubbing and stuff. I'd literally be in the theatre all times of the day. Now, at this point, I was to then meet my future husband while studying in Oldham. He was on the same course as I was, studying stage management, and he also worked at the same theatre that I worked at. We then got married at Manchester Town Hall. Not a small place, I must say. Quite a big do. If you don't know of Manchester, look up the Town Hall. It is massive. It wasn't a church for us. We went big. We went for a really big wedding, and it was a lovely day. We bought our first house together. But at this point, we were both doing jobs we didn't really want to do in the daytime, although we were working at the theatre in the evening. At the theatre, we worked on every show that came in. I was so lucky I got to work with Cliff Richard, John Barrowman, the Glyndebourne Opera, English National Ballet. We did the Heathcliff musical with Cliff. Just everything. It was just the best time. We did the Royal Shakespeare Company. I got to work with Michael Sheen, and it was just a phenomenal time when we worked at that theatre. It's just in the daytime we had kind of, admin type jobs. I actually fitted shoes in the daytime, working at a shop called Daisy and Tom, which was a massive children's store that enabled me to buy our first house. And this is when, soon after we got married, I found out I was pregnant pretty much straight away. And that's where Ellie came along. And followed by that, Alex. Now, while the kids were little, I kind of put all my performance on the back burner. Didn't really do any singing or sort of dancing or even working in the theatre. I was doing admin jobs. I was actually working for the RAC in what was called accident services, where we looked after cars that had been involved in accidents, got them fixed and put them back on the road. And I was doing that. And it was a really cushy job, really. To say that I had 2 girls, 3 and 1.5. It helped with my maternity, you know, through that period. And it was a cushy job. It was well paid. If the kids were ill, I could leave when I needed to. But it wasn't what I'd really set out to do. And there was always this little sort of glimmer of, I really have to get back to singing. I really have to get back to performance. And I found out that my neighbour for the house that we'd bought, she was an actress and she'd heard me singing while changing a nappy. And I started to coach her just a little bit in vocals. And that's when I got this idea. Why not go back to college again? I know, college again, 6 years. This was the 6th year of training. I went back to college and I must have been crazy. I was doing 2 days a week on this like full-time teaching course, 3 days a week working at the RAC. I had toddlers aged 3 and 1.5, and it was crazy. That's when my first business was born, and that was vocal tutor. And that's when I started to train properly as a vocal coach, singing teacher. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's just been a little bit different for me to be able to give you a bit of an insight of, you know, how I got to the point of being a vocal coach and a singing teacher, some of the experiences that I've had in my life to get me to this point. So it is to be continued. This is the point where I actually started work as a vocal coach just from my home, and then I started my first business, vocal tutor, and as they say, the rest is history. To be continued. If you liked this video and enjoyed it, please do subscribe, share, all those kinds of things, and I'll see you in the next one.